Hello and welcome to this video on dual write, setup and configuration. My name's Neil Reardon and I'll be taking you through this process today and hopefully you will find this video useful. So what is dual write? Well, hopefully if you are attempting this you understand what dual write is. Make sure please that before you start this you have read docs.microsoft.com in and around this. If you don't know where to go looking, you'll actually find me using this in the video, so hopefully you'll be able to work along with me as well. So what's the scenario for today? Well, we are going to set up a dual write for an Azure hosted T1 environment. That's basically your normal demo box, hosted on your Azure under your subscription key. The other one is going to be the existing Dynamics F&O environment, and basically the same scenario is in play for both. There are some additional complexities with the second one which you may well want to take on, and they are also available in Docs.
So the first stop on our journey is going to be Microsoft Docs. Primarily this is because all information really pertaining to all the products is now located here, and it's a fundamental starting point for any of the work we're going to do or any new features we want to adopt. So if I go to the search bar and I just type in dual write and just do a simple search, at the top of the list will be the link to the setting up requirements and basically the setup steps for dual write that we're going to go through today. As you can see, under the dual write setup we have a couple of scenarios, and importantly the one we're going to use today is enable dual write from existing F&O environment. Now this process will take us through a number of steps. First of all the prerequisites, then the linking, and then enabling the entity maps. And we're going to go through all those today. So bear with us as we're going to move through all these pieces and hopefully you'll find this useful. So the basis of doing any of this work is to make sure that we have all the right access to all the right areas of the systems that we're going to need to configure dual write. So as you can see here, I have access to my CDS instance where I have CE, SE installed and a number of other elements. I also have access to my Power Apps environment where I am in my environment and I will be adding into solutions, as you will see. And then finally I have my F&O environment. And this is actually configured just very simplistically with Contoso data, and nothing particularly special here, but it gives us some pieces of data to work with. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our Power Apps environment and our solutions under our CDS environment. And we're going to go into Open App Source. And what we're going to do is we're going to load in the first solution, which is called Dual Write Core. So we need this obviously for the initial setup. Before, if you were part of any of the previews or anything of that nature, then you knew we had to do this manually. Thankfully now this is all taken care for us. So obviously needs to log in, you need to have all the correct rights once again to get this all started, but obviously this will now load in that solution into your environment. It takes a little bit of time, but hopefully not too long on this session, but we're going to speed things up just to move on to the next point. So we've got to choose basically the environment that we're going to install into, and then we've got to basically agree some privacy statements and some legal terms. So once we've agreed to that, the solution will start to be applied to the environment. As you can see, we then actually bounce back into the old D365 Administration Center in order for this to work, but they're basically, importantly, the installation is now pending. So if we go now back to the new solution viewer, the reality, what is going to happen is that will now show that solution in the list. Now this has been speeded up. That actually has taken in and around 5 minutes for that to actually load in. So you're going to need to give it some time, and this is going to become a key feature through this process of when we're loading these solutions in, that you have to give it enough time, otherwise you're going to find yourselves getting stuck in this process. So now we're going to go off and we're going to grant some permissions in F&O. So we go off to our F&O instance and we go into our modules, down to system administration, and then over to Azure Active Directory applications. Now this will open up a new form, and basically what we're doing, we're adding 2 records into this, and importantly these records are located in the docs post, and you should get the information from there. So what is that information? Well, these are these horrible client ID GUIDs. So I'm going to take the first one and put it in there and give it a name. So basically, here we go, and I'm going to give it a user of admin. Now it's important once again that we have all the right security permissions. This is the these are the accounts that are going to start to actually write into F&O. So if you are the owner of the box, then the reality is this is going to work out okay for you. Okay, so we've entered those, and we're just going to save that, and then we're going to move on to the next. So our next stop is in data management. So if this is a brand new environment you haven't used before and you've run up just for this purpose, then the reality is you will need to initiate the data entities because they will not be there. If this is an existing environment, we need to refresh those entities now as part of this process. So off the framework parameters, and then once that form loads, we go to entity settings, and then we choose refresh entity list. Now this will take some time, okay, and we've got to basically wait for this. Depending on the speed of the environment, this may take a different amount of time, and what will happen is that we will get basically a notification in the top right hand corner once this is done. So we're going to just basically shorten this sequence and move on. So once the entity is refreshed, we can move on to the next step, which is actually permissions inside the CDS. So we go back to our environment here, and we're going to go up to advanced settings. Once in advanced settings, we're going to go into security, and then we're going to start creating some application users. So under here, we're going to go to security and under users. You'll see a number of application users that are generally there by default. Now, we need to make some new ones. So what do we need to do? Well, once again, all of this information is located within the docs post, but we're going to create a new. And then under here, we're going to select application user. That's going to give us a slightly different form, and we're going to give it a username. So, you know, nothing too clever here. Then the application ID. So this is held within the docs in post, and it's very important that you get the right one. So then we're going to type the first name, so Jewel, and then interestingly enough, their second name is right. And then we're just going to put a primary email address. So I'm just going to put mine in here just to save this off. So what we're going to do is we're going to save that, and that is now ready to go. Now what we need to do is basically make another one. So we just close that, and then we'll make another user. So in here, the username, so it'll be JewelWright2. And then in the application ID, we're going to choose the next number that already exists within inside docs. And then once again, nothing clever. We're going to just do JewelWright2. If I can spell. And then the primary email, I'm just going to use bob@bob.com for that one. So the next step is to make sure that we give the right rights to each one of these application users. So we select the first one and we go to manage roles, and we come all the way down to system administrator, and we provide that access level. And then we do the same for the first one. And there we go. We've set up the 2 application users, and we've provided that they now have enough access for the next part of the system. The next step we're going to carry out is to provide consent to the Common Data Service to access our tenant. So this tenant is obviously located in our environment, potentially all the client's environment, and we have to give that level of consent. Now to do that, we have to follow a URL, and that URL is provided in the docs postings. So it's a simple matter of copy and pasting, as long as you have the correct access. And then you're going to basically log in with the account that you've got, and as you can see, it's going to ask for an awful lot of access rights in order to set this up. You accept that, and basically that will then register your tenant is up and running, as you can see here. So that then draws a close that process, and we can move on to the next step. And the reality for that next step is to make sure that we bring in the next rather large solution in order for us to get the dual right process working. In order to do this, we just need to go back to our Power Apps solution, and we are going to then go back to App Source. Now this is where for the keen eye view, you would have seen before when I searched for dual right, there was two options. So if I search again, you'll see that the dual right application orchestration solution. So we're going to get that. So we shorten the sequence slightly just for it to load in. But once again, make sure you choose the correct application, agree to the privacy statement. Once again, this pushes us to the old D365 Administration Center, and as you can see here, I have an installation scheduled, and now it is just a waiting game. Importantly, the first time this came out as GA and I did these steps, I did not give this long enough, and I went on to the next steps, and in actual fact I completely ruined my entire process here. You have to give enough time for this process to complete, and once again what we will see is we'll see a number of solutions entered into here. We're going to basically wait for this to occur and then stop the video and just come back to it afterwards, and I'll give you an expectation of time taken and point out the important number of components of these solutions that have. So welcome back after a brief break to let all of these solution loads in. As you can see, we have a number of solutions now that have been loaded automatically by us bringing in from App Source all of that information provided by Microsoft. So all of these will be familiar to anybody on the preview. We used to have to load these in manually, but just for context, we basically stopped the video after loading and started at 22 minutes past the hour. If we just go and look at the last one here, you'll see that actually this was successful at 8:45. So that's over 20 minutes worth of wait time to make sure that all of these are in, and you have to just give it the time. Okay, you can't cut this in half, predominantly because of this solution. If this solution is not ready by the time we come to now going to F&O and set up the dual right piece, then no company ID data will move, which means you'll just get loads of data moving across. But if you decided to sync more than one company, there will not be the break between that data. So it's absolutely important that we make sure that this all comes through, and this was one of the primary fall downs that a couple of us have gone through from various different people on the Yammer group. Now that it is GA. So let's move on then. So we're going to go into finance operations now and set up dual right. So let's go over to our F&O environment now, and we're going to go back to the data management framework in the workspaces here, and we're going to click on the dual right tile, which is located here. What this will do is it will open up a wizard where we'll be guided through a number of steps. These steps once again are on docs. Important to make sure you keep checking back to that guidance there. So I'm going to start a new link in the environment, and what's going to happen now is for my tenant, it will go off and look at all CDS environments against my tenant. Very important. Remember, dual right is only works with F&O and CDS in the same tenant. So I'm going to choose my dual right demo environment, choose next, and then I'm going to choose my legal entities out of my F&O environment. Now what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to take GBSI and I'm going to take USRT, so a UK based company, and then a US retail company. And the predominant reason for this is the product mix that we get from those two different setups. So once the legal entities are loaded in, we're going to choose GBSI, and then we're going to come down to USRT, and we're going to choose next. Of course, you can choose more, or you could just choose one. That's completely up to the determination of what you're going to try and work for. Now, this is a stage called health checks. Now, this is a great little check feature that if you do have any of these fail, back to docs, it will tell you exactly what step you have missed. But if you have actually followed all the steps that I've done today, you should pass all of these because that was the whole point of the video. So then we go to next, and basically all the just a quick summary before we get going. So we're going to create now, and that will create basically the dual write process between F&O and CDS, and then what we're going to need to do then is load in our entity maps. So once this is saved, we will then go into the step of loading in our entity maps. So now we're ready to load in our entity maps. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically go to apply solution, and what that's going to do is it's going to look back into the solutions that we loaded into the CDS, and as you can see here we have the dual write entity maps. Now we're going to select that and we're going to hit apply, and what that's going to do is going to load in all of the entities and the maps that Microsoft have provided out of the box in order for us to then actually start moving data between the two environments. It takes a little bit of time, so once again we will restart when that's complete. So that only took a couple of minutes, and now I have all the entities preloaded that can be used in dual write out of the box. And as you can see, there's a lot of them, which gives some great capability in solutioning. Now, I have to basically start the synchronization process per entity. Now, why do I have to do this? Well, I have to do this because I am running a T1 basically Azure hosted environment. If I was running a Microsoft hosted environment created via LCS using the new toggle switch basically to set up a CDS instance for me at the same time, then I can leverage something called initial sync. Initial sync will take care of all of this pain that we're about to go through in synchronizing the entities one by one. Now, on top of that, it is very important that we do these in the right order. Now, there is some dependency management going on, so that wasn't there for a little while before. So if I choose CDS contacts, for example, if I choose to run that, you can see here that I have show related entities. So you can see here that all these related entities are not yet running. And so if I did try to start this, it would try to start all of these entities for me before it then turned on the CDS contacts v2. Now, you can attempt to go this way. There are several that do not have dependencies. I personally, going through the preview, I would not recommend this. I would recommend following the docs post and doing it manually if you are on the environment of a T1 like myself. So how do I do that? Well, I'm just going to use this window here, and there is a particular docs post here which takes you through all of the dependency chain for the synchronization order. Starts with supply chain management entities and then goes down into the finance entities. From my experience, it is best, obviously you only want to sync what you need to sync, that'd be one thing, but if you are just doing this for demo purposes, like I will be doing, then start with the finance entities and then move on into the supply chain entities. I find that is the most stable way of approaching the work. So if we come down here, you know, the first one that will be on here will be currencies and transactional currencies from the finance entities. So we will go in here and we'll search down and we'll find currencies, transactional currencies. We click this. Now, unfortunately, I've just got that one, so I'll just take that one off. As you can see, I now have my run option. So what I'll do is I'll choose run. Okay, and you can see it's not run before, and I want to do an initial sync, and I will hit run. Now, as you can see, this could take several minutes to complete this task. You'll get a slight bar there, and you will now just have to wait. You must wait for each one to complete. Do not get snappy with this. Take your time. It means you'll get it right. And we will come back basically when this one is done, and we're going to do a shortened sequence of turning on all these entities so you don't have to watch me. But we will then give you an associated time period that has taken to get them all turned on, so you have an understanding against effort amount. So as you can see, this is now running, and you can have a quick look at how long that took us by having a look at the initial sync details. And then just going in here, we see that the last updated was basically 8:51. Just for reference, we started that at 8:49, so that took 2 minutes and put in 177 records. So basically now we're going to go through setting the rest off and running. We're going to obviously make a montage for this because we're going to speed it up, but importantly I thought I'd just raise one point that's not actually really that clear in the documentation, and that's back in our CDS security area. So we created 2 users with full administrative rights in order to use dual rights. Now what we didn't do was look at the teams those users were associated to. Now I only have one team here. You would expect of course to have more, and certain amounts of granularity within those teams. Now I'm the only person using the environment, so this is absolutely not considered best practice at all. But I'm going to set the main team here as system admin and make sure that that is ticked. If your group doesn't have this ticked, then you will run into a few problems further down the line when you start syncing different entities. So it's definitely worth a check before you start to go any further. But back to the setting of the entities off, and here goes the speed up. Right, so we come to the end of setting up just the finance entities here. Now we had to run initial sync a couple of times around the customer accounts piece. That is natural. You can see actually that there's some notes here around that fact. That basically took just over 1 hour to complete. So that was a fair amount of time. We're now going to attempt to go for the SCM piece, and once again we'll go and speed it all up. So interestingly enough, I started up the first one, units, and it immediately failed. It had an issue with the Fahrenheit unit as it tried to work. So basically the reality was we reran the process, and as you can see here, if I go into it and I look at the initial sync details, we ran again. So we had 85 upserts this time with 0 errors. So as you can see, it's just one of those things. You just got to restart it in the first instance and then go again and hope it all works. So now we're going to continue with So there you have it. We've done the SCM part of the sync, and that is now complete. That's taken about 3 hours with Contoso data. So please take this into account when you start this process. It's going to take a lot of time, depending on your data loads within inside your F&O instance and potentially your CDS instance.
There we have it. We've come to the end of the video and the end of the configuration for dual write. You can now take advantage of your data in the CDS as well as other solution options. Please just take note of these 3 points. Read docs.microsoft.com before attempting to start this process. You need to take the latest information in, and you need to make sure any of the guidance hasn't changed. There's a lot of access requirements, as you would have seen, Azure, CDS and F&O. If you do not have all those access, please make sure you do, or you can get hold of a team member who is willing to help you in that area. And the last one, if the sync doesn't work the first time, don't worry about it. You just have to resync. Also, the error handling is very good now, so you'll be able to make any changes you might need to or understand any issues. So enjoy, and thanks for watching.